Hello, subscribers, followers of Gilgit Baltistan 360. Today we are with a special guest. She is from the US, currently living in New York. So we'll learn more about her experiences. Before proceeding with the interview, I request our subscribers, our viewers, our followers to please share the content that we are producing, and please feel free to give your valuable feedback. So first, let me introduce you to Dr. Alice Hunsberger. First, give us a brief introduction of yourself, and then we'll proceed with the questions that I have queued.
Thank you, Rahmat Karim. I'm very happy to be here with you, and I'm very happy to be in Gilgit. And my name is Dr. Alice Hunsberger. I'm an educator, a researcher. I like to explore places. In fact, in New York City, I decided to become a tour guide so that I can learn more about New York City and take people around. But I've worked for lots of nonprofits and in New York City, including Asia Society and Museum, and American Federation of the Arts, and also Amnesty International, helping to promote them and fundraise for them. So learning to write about why we should support nonprofits, why we should support arts organizations and educational organizations is something I've been doing for decades.
All right. Let's talk about education, which is a subject very dear to me, as I got my graduation degree in this very subject. So I want to ask you the very basic question. What is the need of education? What life goals does education?
This is such an essential question that I find it difficult to answer, because I come from generations, both my parents were teachers and my grandparents were teachers, and so I take it as a given that we need teachers and we need learning. So we need schools, whether it's a small school, one-on-one tutoring, or a large school. What we're trying to do is bring up the next generation in a university, in a school. We're trying to shape characters. It's not just facts of what year something happened or how many colors are in a rainbow, but what do we care about and what values do we want to protect and promote? So if we're trying to have a democracy, then we need people who can think for themselves and who can care about other people, not just themselves.
What are the differences between general education and research-based education?
I would say general education is for people who want to function in the world. We basically need to know how to measure things. If you're going to be a painter in a house, you need to be able to know how many square feet of wall you have. If you're going to be making cookies, you need to know what measurements are. And if you are going to go into a business, then you have to have some sense of how a business works and how to make a profit and be exciting to customers. Research education is for people who want to figure out why things are the way they are, why we do something a certain way, and what was the history that got us there, and deciding whether we want to stay there. Do we like that we have this situation? Do we like that we have a law like this, or we don't like this law? And so, or we want to investigate how many schools actually teach a foreign language, for example, and should we teach more foreign language? Well, I personally am someone who believes we should all learn lots of languages, and it gives us, opens up the world up to us. So research is when you want to go more deeply into something, and also you come up with a new idea that no, you're not just copying what other people have done. One of the most important things in any thesis or dissertation that you create has to be what is original about your work. What is your original question that you are now answering, and no one else has answered it before. So in what way? So let's say you want to write about George Washington. There have been hundreds of books, thousands, written about George Washington, but you're going to go write a new book about George Washington. You have to have a new question or a new way to look at the information or to address it, and for a new generation that you have found out about. So it first requires that you go learn all the previous material. You have to do you have to do a review of the literature. You have to know what's happened before. And then you can start formulating your question. And the most important thing is to be ready to change. As your data starts coming in and you start reading more and more, you'll find out, well, there's actually a more interesting question over here. It didn't go the way I wanted it to go, so what am I going to do? So you have to be willing to be humble before the facts that you actually find, rather than say, I'm right at the very beginning. But you're going to investigate and see, you're going to test your thesis by finding data and information to back it up.
I want to know the difference between the language of research and the language that we common people speak in our day-to-day based interaction.
One of the things that you find out right away when you talk to really intelligent people, and that suddenly any issue becomes very interesting. For example, I was once at a conference and there was this very senior art historian, Islamic art historian, and he looked at the chairs and he said, in my college we would never have chairs like this. And you just take every subject that comes to you, like what's the weather doing, or why are they telling us the weather always sounds like a disaster when it's just cold or it's just rain? Why do they do that? So you could have a deep philosophical question that you go through it, and then you go through the subject more deeply than just like, oh, it's really hot, or oh, I better take 2 umbrellas or something. So it's mainly in how these very intelligent people address even the simplest topic, and you're surprised when, I don't know, the first time I went to Harvard, how everybody sounded so ordinary that I first thought they just talk about normal things, and then after a while you see how they talk about it. That it's a weighing. They look at it like a jewel. Like, this is a topic. We can look at it this way. We can look at it that way.
Okay, so you speak more than one international language. Okay, what is the most fascinating thing about learning more languages? I can contemplate that the first thing must be opportunities to interact with people, more people, opportunities to explore traditions and ideas.
Yes, I'm extremely fascinated by language, and my first dreamy moment happened when I was in 2nd grade. And so in 2nd grade, you've been having you've been to kindergarten, you've been to 1st grade, and they teach you English, and this is what an R looks like, and this is what an S looks like, and then S and T makes this sound, and this is how we read, and this is how we write. But my school did an experiment to bring in a French teacher every Tuesday and Thursday and teach us French. It was an experiment back in the 60s to say, can little children learn a foreign language? And of course we know they can. They learn it better than we can. But in those days, the idea of teaching a foreign language was that it had to be all grammar, grammar, grammar. And so they thought, well, little 5-year-olds can't learn what a subjunctive is. But so this teacher, this college student came in every Tuesday and Thursday, and she said, "Qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est la table, c'est la chaise. Je m'appelle Alice," right? And I was blown away, because everything I had been taught was that there's one right way, which of course is English, right? And then suddenly there's another door over here, and there's a whole other world that it takes you to. And they don't say chair, they say chaise. And they don't say table, they say table.
In the U.S., right?
This was in the U.S., yes. They're doing this experiment. So from that moment, I just said, well, there are so many hundreds of languages around the world. There must be hundreds of doors and hundreds of worlds we can go into, that everybody's thinking in different ways. And then, of course, when you study French or any of the other Latin languages, they've divided the world into masculine and feminine. Like, who does that? And then you learn the Germans do that, and lots of languages do that. And does it have any meaning? What does it mean to say the table is feminine, but something else is a masculine word? So it just opens your eyes that there are many, many ways to think about things, and that we shouldn't be comfortable in our own one way, that we have one language, and we think that's the only way to say things. So one of the worries I have is that so many people are learning English now, but they have to learn it at a superficial level first. They have to learn, how to buy something or find their way. So that's the first level of language you need to have. But they don't imagine that English also is deep. It has poetry. That their language has poetry, and they think it's the best poetry in the world. But they can't imagine the English. And I once had a hairdresser cutting my hair, and I said, something about English poetry, and she said, the English doesn't have anything. It's just a language for business. And she had the scissors on my hair, and so I couldn't do anything. but I was like, oh my God, that to think that your language is the only one that has nuance and depth. Or people who tell me there's one right translation for one word. No, there's so many ways to say something in every language, and that's what makes translation so hard. It's not one-to-one. And so you rob the language of its complexity, and languages are alive and they're changing. So we have to let them be that. And if you just take it and say there's only one way to say, buy a car, then you've lost other ways to do things. So it's wonderful to see how there are words for things. Like in Japanese, there's a verb to go looking at the cherry blossoms. That's the verb. In the spring, we're going to go do that. They don't say we're going to go looking at the cherry blossoms. They have a special verb for that. And then every language has some special things that we don't have in our language. I think, was it in German, that has a phrase for walking in the forest, that's a special kind of walking, and you're communing with the trees, and something special is happening. So languages are just doorways to enter a whole new way of thinking, and that's why I think we should all know lots of languages, and the past languages. We should know old languages too.
Would you like to share with us your experience with these two globally spoken languages? One is, of course, English, and with that we have Persian, as you are fluent in Persian language as well. You have researched, you have learned their language, I guess, by living with the natives, as well as you traveled to the places where it was spoken, and your research it has relevancy with the Persian language. So difference of experiences with both the languages, the English and the Persian.
Well, let's do English first. So I was raised in America, and my father, everybody speaks English in the house. There's no foreign language in the house. Many people come to America, and they do have a foreign language in the house. But ours is seventh generation back to the 1700s in America. So there's nothing foreign in our house. And on top of that, my father was an English teacher. And so he was very mean and would correct you with a hiss and cruel if you made an error in grammar, or if you said, the worst sin was, does everyone have their pencil? Instead of saying, does everyone have his or her pencil? So this is long before feminism. This is grammar. And he would throw things at the television when they would say the wrong grammar. So I grew up with a very strict approach to the English language and pronunciation. And so when I decided, beginning in second grade, I decided I wanted to learn all these languages, and I wanted to learn, of course, all the European ones, but then I said, then you start the interesting ones. And so Persian and Arabic, and I was hoping to do Turkish also, but I haven't done that in my life. And then it would just keep going. And I studied Japanese. So the Persian language won as the one that I would spend most of my time in. And I did it in a classroom at NYU, New York University in Manhattan, as an undergraduate. So that was my major. So I studied Persian and Arabic as my major field, Middle East studies. And then I went on to graduate school at Columbia doing Arabic and Persian also. Now you begin in a class, I have to learn the alphabet. Thank goodness the Arabic teacher took 2 weeks to learn the alphabet. 2 weeks. I heard there were some classes that do it in 3 days. I'm like, how can you learn a new alphabet in 3 days? But I was so glad. So I have a strong, elementary education, meaning fundamental, foundational education in the Arabic alphabet. And then moving to Persian, you have a lot of the same vocabulary, but the Persian language is an Indo-European language. It's not a Semitic language. So it borrows a lot of the vocabulary, the way English borrows Latin roots from the French. So it enriches your own vocabulary without changing your grammar. So a friend of mine says that when I speak Persian, I become nicer. Well, mostly because I lose the American tough or very sure of myself, but because Persian's my second my second strongest language. I also speak Spanish and French, and studied German and Italian, and a couple of other languages, and of course, since it's my second language, I'm slower in it. I have to think more about it. And because since the revolution, I haven't been back to Iran. So my studies were classroom studies. I began in the classroom and with texts. Is graduate school, I'm going to go do texts. Textual study is Persian culture. Poetry, love poems, history, religion. And it was only a few years later in graduate school that I got to go to Iran for the first time, and that was under the Shah, and so for me suddenly what I've been studying in books came alive, like people walking around, and there had been a part of me that thought maybe this is fake, maybe this language is really, it's just Cyrus and Darius, and nobody speaks it anymore. So suddenly the past. Or what if I'm studying Ferdowsi, the national epic, and the love poetry from 1,000 years ago, there's something ancient about it. So maybe they don't speak it anymore. Maybe it's gone. And so there it was real. So I felt I was thrown both past and in the present. So Persian is very nice because it doesn't have gender. So that's one thing that's very good for the love poetry, because you never know if the oo
is male or female.
Exactly. Like we don't know who the lover is, and it's not gendered in any way, unless they say something about a beard or something. The Persian language is very flexible in that they tell you rules. And then you find out you can go back and forth. I suspect that's true of most languages, but Persian likes to break the rules, and so I've enjoyed trying to shift from being only. Not all scholars do this, who are text-based scholars, but I actually put a lot of work into trying to speak the language in a contemporary way so that I could have control of the language myself. So it's not as strong as I'd like it to be, and I'd always like to practice more, but there it
We're
is.
discussing language, and we know that language is not limited to the verbal thing. Non-verbally, we as humans communicate, People pass on messages through gestures, through signs and symbols. We get hints about what they are trying to say. So tell us about your experience in the region. How you find the people? Are they welcoming? Are they open? Are they reserved? Are they somehow trying to maintain a distance from foreigners like you?
I'll take the question about my experience here. My experience in Pakistan has been absolutely a delight. Beginning when I landed in Karachi airport, and I'm trying to think, where should I go? Am I transit? Am I no? I'm trying to get off. But what are these signs? And so I passed a man in a uniform and badge, and he said, "What's your problem?" And I said, "I don't know which line to get on." And he said, "What passport do you have?" And there, you have to be worried. I said, "American." He said, "Come with me." And I, oh gosh, what's going to happen now? And what he did was he pushed me to the front of every line, because he said, she has to go first. And then even he corrected someone. And here, for your first question about what we understand with very little words. So if you catch one word or two words, that's how we're grasping for meaning. That somebody used the word foreigner, and he said, "No, she's not a foreigner. She's an American, and she needs to get to the front of the line." And I was just so surprised. And everybody's watching. Other people in uniforms are saying, like, what is he doing? And so he helped me find my car, which was waiting for me, and took me to it. And I took a picture with him. So, I mean, from the first moment I landed, I've been taken care of in a happy way. And that's happened in other airports, too. I've already been in back to Karachi domestic airlines airport, and then up to Islamabad, and in the flight to Gilgit, I sat next to a wonderful woman who we talked all the way, and because I had a disaster. Now, what's a woman's disaster? My nail polishes had all leaked in the suitcase, and so they had stuck to the plastic. I had them in good plastic bags, so they didn't, but they were smelling, and I had to just throw them all away. So I wouldn't have any nail polish, and that's very serious. And especially if you're going to speak about philosophy, right? And she said, she opened up her suitcase and gave me all her nail polishes. She just went. So how have I been received? Everybody's been really great. I've just had my first walk around Gilgit, and people were friendly, and they don't mind if you want to take a picture of them. Because as you know, you have to be sensitive whether people want to in other cities with bazaars, and they don't mind if you want to take a picture of them. Because as you know, you have to be sensitive. Now for the question about nonverbal versus verbal communication. There is some figure where people have actually analyzed, and I forget if it's 70 or 80% of our communication is actually nonverbal. That the verbal part is very small part of when we're communicating something. And you can see this in infants. Infants are working very, very hard with their eyes to figure out what's going on, what is happening here, and they don't have verbal understanding, but they can sure tell if people are angry or if people are sad, or if there's no milk. Then they will get the message, and they will react to it. So they're already reading. They're reading the room. They're reading the people. A very interesting thing happened in my first trip to Iran. So every culture has its own ways of nonverbal communication. And one of the things you learn when you're studying Persian is that the Iranians, to say no flip their head back. That means nah. And so after a while, they don't have to say nah. They just go, and you have to be looking to know that they did answer you. They did. And so I was visiting a home once, and the mother was behind me in the kitchen, and I was on the couch, and there was a little, let's say, 3 or 4 year old girl playing at my feet, and she's trying to entertain me and talk to me, and her mother asks her something, do you want some? She's serving tea or juices or something, and the mother asks her, do you want any? And then I'm watching the girl. I was watching the girl, and then the mother says, okay, then you can have it later. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't see anything. She didn't say anything. She didn't tilt her head back to say no. Where was the no? How did the mother know that the daughter said no? Because it was not verbal, and it was not the verbal sign that I had already learned. And then I was analyzing it, that not only do you tilt your head back, your eyelids close. And so all the girl had done was just close her eyelids, and it meant no. So there are all kinds of, what does a shrug mean? What does the Indian, head wobble mean? What are we doing? What is going on? Should you be insulted by something if somebody doesn't answer you? All this is, when you're in a foreign country, you realize it's not just the language you have to be paying attention to. It's all the other, like a raised eyebrow in England is really powerful. Like that's a condemnation. And I heard there's some school in America even is going to forbid you could raise your eyebrow at somebody because it's so insulting. It's such a put down. So nonverbal communication is something that's primal. It's essential, and it differs from culture to culture, and it's a fundamental part of learning a language. And so far, people notice me and they stare at me. So there's the staring, both young, old, male, female. So there's just the staring, and so I'm just used to that. And I smile back. I smile, and then they smile back. So smiles are working. In some cultures, smile might not work. I've been experimenting. Like, does a smile work? Should I smile at men? I don't know. Should I smile at women? What do they think? What about little kids? So it's really my second day here, and I'm still trying to figure it out. But everything's been positive. Everything's been I haven't felt any negative feeling, discomfort, or I haven't felt anything negative coming at me. I haven't felt like, oh, you're a foreigner, we resent you, or you're a foreigner, who do you think you are, or you're a woman without a veil, we hate you. I haven't felt that, so far.
Okay, now at the end of this interview, I want you to give us some advice as young learners, as educators, as keen observers of society. What attitudes may supplement in our exploration of ourselves and the world around us?
That's a very hard question. If you're saying supplement, well, what did we already decide we need? What do we need in education? We need to study and books, but I would say we need curiosity and to be open-minded about to see what's happening and what's coming at us, that other people have other ways of doing things, and they may be even better than your own, or they may be just as good, or they may be horrible. So you have to decide, but you can't start out by saying everybody different is bad. to be a young learner, you want to give yourself as much future as possible. So that way you would have lots of avenues open to you. So how can you give yourself many avenues? And that would be to constantly have your mind open, but to try to see how things have been done in the past, how things have been done in different places, how can you follow in your family's values, and how can you make yourself different from your family's values? Where do you want to make your place in the world? And so those are values that you can live by, but you can also apply them to your learning, to your education. So maybe you take a course in something you never thought that you will never use, whether it's astronomy, astrophysics, or Chinese philosophers over the last 1,000 years that you can learn from and make that can fill in part of your life.
Alice Hunsberger, it was an interesting interview, and you were generous, so generous, to spare time for this interview. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.